right. All right, I got it. Listen, I got to go. They're here. Yeah, they just arrived. Yep, they're here to watch another episode of the Main Street Randyland YouTube channel. Okay. We're talking about you. I see you made it here. Well, we're over here at another fun spot of Randyland as we talk about my stuff at the Main Street Randyland YouTube channel. It's Randy's collection, and what a perfect thing as I hold my ruler would be to talk about my first Fascination Tables. Well, I had already gotten thrown out of Seaside, all right, if you remember the story. I was banished from Seaside, and now I was starting to play in other places, so where can we go? Well, there were Fascinations and other boardwalks at that time, and there was one in Asbury Park, but there was one in Keansburg, and we kind of found it because we heard about it being up there. We went up there to ride. It was the old Kessel Brothers Fascination, had been there from 1938. And it was definitely different to play at because the tables were different than the ones I were used to that was made in 1974. So the ones from 1938 were different styled enough that it was different to play. So I couldn't win so well there, but I still liked playing. But in Seaside, there were two Fascination places at one point, 1974. There was an overlap. The other Fascination was there last year in 1974. It was owned by Quinn Davenport. He was over on Hamilton Avenue and the boardwalk. And if you people know Seaside, that's where Sand Topaz is all these years later. That was Quinn's Fascination. Now, I only got to play in Quinn's place a couple times, not a lot, because we started playing at Lucky's Fascination, and that's what we were used to. But my sister, at that time, was working at a nickel pitch at a Greyhound game down at Seaside Park that was owned by the same people who owned Fascination. So they had a rule that if you worked for them, you couldn't play by them, so she wasn't allowed to play Fascination, so she played over by Quinn. So that's how I got to play a few times by Quinn, but it was there last year. Quinn had opened there in 1952, and he was there until 1974. 74 is when Lucky's opened, and there were two only the 1 year. So, now here we are, 1976. I'm throwing out a Fascination. We find Fascination up in Seaside, up in Keansburg at the Kessel Brothers. And then we found there was a second Fascination in Keansburg that had recently opened on the corner, on the side street, called Carr Avenue Fascination. And that was owned by a man named Guy Bennett. And Guy Bennett also owned the Kentucky Derby race, which was on the Derby, which was a sister game of Fascination. So his tickets were good between the Kentucky Derby and Carr Avenue Fascination. So we started playing by Guy, and the tables were more similar to the ones I was used to from Seaside. And I recognized the tables, and I said to Guy, who was running the game, I says, "Are these the tables that used to be from Seaside?" And he was surprised that I knew that. And he said, "Yes, they were." And I said, didn't there used to be 52? Because he was running 48. He said, yes, there were 52, but he didn't have room for all the tables when he set them up where he was, so he only had 48. Well, I was like, can I buy those other 4 tables? He didn't want to sell them because he was using them for parts for his tables. Well, these were the same tables that Quinn Davenport had in Seaside, because he had 52 when he was there, and I recognized them. So now Guy Bennett was running 48. He had the other 4 in storage. Now, interestingly enough, the older tables, like when Quinn had them, were built in sections of 4. The newer tables, like Lucky's Fascination, were built in sections of 2. And you could put 2 2s together to make a 4. But you couldn't divide a 4 into 2 2s. So it was an improvement they made over time. All the tables that Guy was using were sets of 4. So he was running 12 sets of 4 for a total of 48 tables. But when they made Quinn's tables, and Fascinations were typically made custom for their setups, the other 4 tables were built in 2s. so they were the end of the line. So there was 2 on each end to fit the space that they had. So the odd tables he had were 2 sets of 2. And with a lot of weeding and, asking and kind of begging, he finally consented to sell me 2 of the 4 tables. And he said they're not complete. He said, but, you could probably, make them work and this and the other, blah, blah, blah. So he sold me the 2 tables, and I bought them with money that I had saved from when I was playing Fascination in Seaside, and they were paying me off in cash. So I was thrilled. This was one of the big thrills. I've had so many thrills in my life. I'm really very, very blessed. But this was one of the big thrills when I got my first 2 Fascination tables. And we came down in the Buick station wagon, and it had one of those clamshell backs that opened, with the glass going up and the bottom going back like a clam, and opened it up. It was just wide enough to slip the 2 body in it, and the head kind of laid on top of it, and you couldn't close the gate because it was, sticking out the back. And we rode back. I was in the front seat with my mom and dad, and I got my hand between the seats, holding on to those tables for dear life in case they tried to slide out the back. They weren't going to slide out, but I was going to make sure of it. We got them home, and me and my dad had to drag them across the front lawn and up the steps into the front door, and there they laid on the floor in the middle of the foyer of the house in Short Hills. And I couldn't wait to, get them together and try to get them to work. And they didn't have any glass. The glass was not there. And so it was just like a wooden grid where the lights would have gone. And there were no power supplies. He didn't have any power supplies for me. But there were the tables, and I remember before I even had them on the legs, I was rolling the balls with them just laying on the floor, and the ball didn't come back too good because the legs in the back weren't higher. Being on the floor, it was flat, but I still enjoyed rolling the ball and kind of remember which light went in, which hole it went in. Then we got to clear out a space in what we called the TV room. It was a room about the size of a bedroom. It was paneled, kind of a rec room, and it was all full of our toys. So I got to clear out a space in there, and me and my father dragged it in, and I got to put the legs on it and put the head on it. Of course, there was no power to it, but I got to roll the balls now with the machines in their normal positions. So now it was the search for the power supplies. And it wasn't easy to get power supplies for them because of the amperage that they were going to pull. They were 12-volt machines, but places like Radio Shack, the biggest power supply they had was 5 amps. And you could light the central light and maybe a couple other lights, but after that, you didn't have enough power anymore. The supply wasn't there. So I was constantly asking Guy, about the power supplies. So he said he thinks he has some power supplies in the garage that he'll give me. So we went over to the garage, and there were a couple of these big metal power supplies. They were kind of rusted over, and he's kind of like moving the rust. He saw, it said 12 on it, so he figured, these are probably 12 volts, whatever, so he gave me these power supplies. So I was thrilled to have them. Like they were much bigger than the ones from Radio Shack now, so I'm probably going to get enough power out of these. So we get them back, and of course, I can't wait, and it's the middle of the night, and I can't sleep, so I'm sitting in the middle of the living room floor, trying to energize some light bulbs from Fascination, with these power supplies. Well, I'm trying to hold the wire onto a light bulb because I didn't have an extra socket to hold it. And somewhere along the line, I must have crossed out the circuit between my hands, holding the light bulb and then trying to get the other thing on. I must have, touched my other finger, and I got shocked. I was thrown back shocked, like somebody, they say it feels like you got hit with a wet sack. It feels like somebody has a wet sack and they slap you with it, and I just went back, and it hurt. And I really thought I was dead. It's the middle of the night. There's nobody around to see. I didn't know if I was dead or not. And I'm like calling for my father, and nobody's answering. I'm yelling. It's the middle of the night. Nobody's answering. You'd figure they'd come out running to see what happened with the kid, and nobody's coming out. So I got up and I walked into my father's room. and he's sleeping, and I'm shaking the bed, and I'm shaking the bed, and he's not waking up, and I'm like, I'm dead, and I'm shaking the bed, and finally he's like, what do you want, God damn it, this, that, and the other, and I said, nothing. I said, because now I knew I wasn't dead, that's all I wanted to know, that I was all right. So I said, go back to sleep. So he went back to sleep, and that was the end of it for that night. So as it turns out, those power supplies the guy gave me were actually neon light transformers, and it was 12,000 volts, not 12 volts, to run neon, and that's why I got zapped as I did. And that's pretty bad. That's bad stuff. If it had been higher amperage, I probably wouldn't have been around, and because I probably had one on each hand, it went right across my chest, which is why I took that big slap like I did and went backwards on it. But eventually, I was able to track down some larger power supplies and get some power to it. And then it was a matter of trying to fix the units so that the 2 units would work. And eventually I got the 2 units to work, but now I'm trying to get the other 2 units from Guy Bennett. And so I'm telling him, you know, I got them working. I says, you know, there's still stuff I got to do. I said, I want to buy those other 2. He didn't want to sell me the other 2, but I wheedled, and eventually he ended up selling them to me, and they were really, really just cabinets. He had cannibalized all the parts out of them. The 4th unit had nothing at all. There wasn't even a 4th unit. It was just wood. The 3rd unit had a metal frame, but all the parts were pulled out of it, and I had to try to track down parts for it and build it. And in high school, I was in high school at the time, in metal shop, I prefabricated one of the metal plates that was necessary for under the holes for the 4th unit. And then I had to get switches, and I went through pinball sources to try to find switches and work them onto the plate and drill in the holes. And I did it in metal shop in school. And the rest of it, he gave me some parts from another old game, but they were 24 volt parts. And obviously, the rest of the units were running on 12 volts, so now I had to have a separate power supply, which was 24, which I got from Sandy Markowitz, who was the pinball guy from United States Amusements that I was getting machines from in Hillside. And pinballs were basically 24, 28 volts, so I used that for that one. And eventually, I was able to build a unit for the 4th unit completely. And the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd units, I got enough parts to make them work, and I made my systems work. Now I had to make a special little interface for the 4th unit to work with the first 3 because there were different voltages, and I got them to work. And then I had to make some little controller so that I could control it and ring the bell and all the things of this nature to go along with it. So I had to have my little fascination tables, and of course there was no mirror, and that was another issue. So we tried getting the guy who still made Fascination in California to make us a mirror. So he got me to measure the stuff and all that stuff, and I gave him the measurements, and they custom made the 2 mirrors we need for a lot of money, and it got shipped in a wooden crate. And I was like, I couldn't believe it when it arrived on UPS at the front door. It was there. And then when I tried to put them in, they were a little too big. They stuck up on the top an extra ½ an inch, so all the lights were, instead of the circle being in the box that controls the light behind it, the circle was too high, so the bottom of the circle was cut off, and the top mirror was sticking up out of the frame, so you couldn't put the molding on it. So we took it to a glass company to try to get them to cut a ½ an inch of glass off the bottom so they would fit into it, and they were reluctant to do it because it was only a ½ an inch, and they were special mirrors, and they didn't want to take any responsibility that if it doesn't break off and they break the mirror, then we're shit out of luck. And these mirrors were a lot of money. It was over $1,000 for these mirrors back then. So they gave it a shot. The first one came off good, and then the second one didn't. It didn't go with a clean cut across. It went off, but unfortunately it chromed off to the side that it didn't matter, and they were able to cut the rest of it off with just a little niche that didn't matter because it went down into the wood. And I got the mirrors back and put them in the machines, and there they have sat ever since, and they've been just fine. So my Fascination machines were there, and I played all the time. My mom and my dad and my sister and friends from school would come over. We'd sit there just rolling the ball for fun. Then I had to put in coverall, because they didn't have coverall. So I had to, you know, figure out a way to put in coverall, and I installed coverall into it. Then, of course, I had to tell Guy Bennett how my machines now have coverall, which even his machines didn't have. So he was trying to get me to show him how to do it on his, and I showed him. I says, it would be too expensive for you to do it on all your 48 machines. I only had to do it on 4. To do it on 48 would have been a lot of money. So he never really did it that way. He eventually put in a coverall, but the coverall was the old-fashioned way of doing it, where it didn't ring off when you got the coverall. It just wouldn't ring off at 5. It just would never ring off. You'd have to watch for the lights, and when somebody got all the lights, you'd yell, coverall, and then the guy would turn the switch off, and that would be the end of the game, and they would just announce the winner by hand, a kind of a manual situation. But mine had an automatic coverall because I had to have an automatic coverall, because Seaside had an automatic coverall, and that's where I learned to play. So my first Fascination tables came from Guy Bennett, and they were originally Quinn Davenport's Fascination tables, and they were at our house in Short Hills. Then when we moved down to Middletown, I had to move those tables. They were up in my bedroom, and I was thrilled to have my tables in my bedroom. And I didn't get to play as much there because that's when we started in business in Keensburg. And now I had the old Kessel Brothers tables, and I had to work on them all the time, and all my time was taken. But my first tables were still dear to me, and they still are. And here they are. They're sitting right up here. And I just plugged them in for the first time probably in 20 years, and they powered up. But as I was telling Bill, I noticed there's a problem, and it's covered with stuff that I really can't get to find out what it is. But if you see the light bar up on the wall there, you see a single light, but there's 5 lights. The second light is dimly lit. That second light should not be lit at all. As I remember, that was a wind sequence line, so there shouldn't be power on the wind sequence line, yet there is. I'm not sure why. I would have to get into it to see why it is, but the rest of the units have powered up. Number 4 is the one with the 24 volts. I don't know what kind of action I'll get. There seems to be something going on here with table number 1, because the top light lit up and no lights were lit. So I don't understand why that would be on. It shouldn't be on. Let's see if any other lights are on. It's probably the switch contact. Down in here, I'm sticking my hand in here. Let's see if I can make it win. If I can get my hand to enough holes here. That's red, 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 red. Look at that. But I had it on instant start, so it restarted immediately, which it shouldn't have done. Let's see why it started on instant start. I had all kinds of little features I was trying out with my little counter control. This is my little counter control box. Can you see it? So, was that instant start? That might have been instant start. I don't remember. I did it so long ago. Well, now that I turned it, if I make a win and it doesn't instant start, then we'll know that was instant start. No, it instant started again. There could be a few reasons for that. Either I don't know which switch it is. I don't think instant start was on that panel. Instant part was on the sub panel. I had a sub panel on the side of it, and that's where instant start was. And that I can't even get to, so it probably got flipped. My Fascination tables, I had to have a bell. Of course, it didn't come with a bell, and I put the bell. And if it wasn't on instant start, the bell would go ring, and then the new game would start ring. Come over to number 4, which is easier to see over here. We'll see if we can light up some lights. So it still works with the gold line. I knew it was there. How about number 3? Yep. So it's still responding. Now I just lost my cover. These gold lights on the top, they are wind lights, wind memory lights. Now that's not an original feature to Fascination. Quinn Davenport's machines did not have that. They were just plain on the top, but the Seaside tables did. So I had to install that into these tables also. It's a Win memory light that remains lit for the next game that's running, so that you know that that was the last table that won. Now, completely unnecessary for you playing at home, but since I'm still the little kid who was thrown out of Seaside, I wanted those tables to be as much like the Seaside tables as they could be. And there they are, my dear Fascination tables. So these are my first Fascination tables, and certainly not my last. I got these when I was 15 years old. I hate to do the math. That's almost 50 years ago. Oh my God. And they certainly, they're special because they're my first, but each machine is special for its own reason. You know, then I got the Keensburg tables, and they were special. But before I got the Keensburg tables, I got the Kennywood tables, and they were special because that was the first full system I got. And then the Keensburg tables was the first store I was running, and they were the oldest tables I got. And then when I got the Seaside tables, those were the tables that I learned to play on, and they were special. And then I bought the Dorney Park tables, and then I bought the other Kennywood Park tables, and the Hershey Park tables, and Fascination tables galore. I mean, it's like the world of Fascination. I wanted to have each Fascination set up as it was to represent what it was in my life and the meanings in the different decades of what they were. Even the Olympic tables, which have their own special story in itself. They're another set that I have that I'm operating currently on it. So I have all these Fascination tables and all these other games, and they need to be set up. They need to be set up, and the stories documented of how they came and what they were, not just to me, but to their life, their other people, and the other people who touched them and played them. They've been around a long time. They share our history. And every part of it is special, including the chairs. I mean, I got these seats. You see these light green chairs? Those are the chairs that they had in Quinn Davenport's Fascination. They didn't all have the same kind of chairs. The same style chair became typical for the machines of the 50s, 60s, 70s, but they were in different colors and different finishes with the vinyl. The Olympic chairs are totally different altogether, and the Bango chairs are totally different because they were from 1938. So there's variations, there's differences in sizes and styles, and all these factors, which probably mean very little to anybody else, they mean a whole lot to people who really understand the intricacies of the game. So with that, we're going to leave it for you to ponder, and we'll see you next time from the Main Street Randyland YouTube channel. And we'll say goodnight to Fascination. Bye, guys.